various elements that we're going to talk about in individual classes. And you should go to the Pro Tips and Tricks page on the ISA site. You should check out the YouTube channel. All these end up on both of those places. And go back and watch the other videos that I focus specifically on one of these 4 elements I'm going to be talking about, or tiers of development and evaluation, because I go into much more detail. I'm not going to cover every single one in crazy amount of detail. I want to kind of pull back the curtain, if you will, on how readers look at and examine screenplays. That's the big one. But then on the same side, which is equally as big, the importance of understanding your process as a creative person. And I know it sounds almost like I'm assuming I know exactly what your process is, because I don't. We all have a different way of approaching, our writing, not only sessions, but just in general, our stories. But in every single screenplay, at the very least, really every single story, including a book, whatever, you have 4 levels of, I guess you can call them development, 4 levels of, or 4 different tiers, 4 different sections. Really the terminology doesn't really matter other than the 4 elements. We have concept, character development, structure, and page work. Pretty straightforward. I don't really have to give you a definition of all of them. Page work maybe a little bit more. It's just the scenes, the actual words on the page, scene writing, scene direction, the dialogue. Concept, character development, structure, and page work. And it's important to be saying it in that order because it gives a little bit of a window into how we usually tend to develop a project. Like, let's say you have a brand new idea, and I'm putting that in quotes, because sometimes ideas come to us in different ways, right? It's not just a conceptual hook or some level of a story situation that you've come up with. Sometimes you just come up with this crazy character and you're like, wow, I think I need to put that person into, or character, maybe it's not a person, it could be a green ogre named Shrek, but you want to put that character within a concept. So sometimes you come up with character first, but regardless, and the whole reason and point behind today's session is to break those down in a way that not only readers are consciously or unconsciously considering when they're reading, but also how we as screenwriters are pretty much doing the same thing. We just have to be cognizant of it. We have to be aware that we're doing this because it can help our brainstorming sessions. It can help test material that we've already finished, but it can also test a new idea that you have. And it's so important to hit that level of questioning early on when you have a new concept, a new idea for a story. You want to be asking yourself a lot of questions up front. And so we'll get into some of those questions. We'll get into the whole rundown here, but going back to why I said it's important to talk about that in its order, meaning concept, character, structure, page work. The importance comes from this idea of if you look at it, and I've mentioned this in previous classes, I think, but if you look at it like a triangle, see if I can do that right. If you look at it like a triangle, at the top of the triangle is concept. You go a little lower, you've got character, you go a little lower at structure, and at the very bottom of the triangle is page work. The reason I'm fitting it like a triangle is because writers tend to spend less time in the actual writing process on concept. They spend a little bit more time on character development, they spend a little bit more time on structure, and then they spend most of their time on page work. Pretty natural, and that's not a bad thing or wrong, and it's not necessarily right either. What I'm wanting to do here with today's session is try to balance that out a little bit more. It's not going to be a perfect square, but we should be considering how much time we're spending on our conceptualization, the testing of an idea. Is this worth my time? Is this actually a great idea? Is this something I'm willing to spend the next 3, 6, 9, sometimes 12 months working on? Because our time is valuable. Every single project we choose to work on says something about us, not only personally, but as screenwriters. So we have to be making those decisions seriously, or taking them seriously. Because how many screenplays do we really have in our lifetime? You know, like the amount of screenplays we could ever write. And let's say you start at the age of 20 until you are lucky enough to live to the age of 90. Maybe 30, like good ones, if you're really productive and working at it, and you're you get a hang of it after a while, and you're just churning them out. That doesn't mean you're getting them produced. I'm just saying you're finishing the screenplays. 30, maybe more. It's hard to say because everybody's different. Everybody's time, constraints and commitments are different. People write faster than other people, but nonetheless, it's probably for most of us, I don't know about 30. I don't know if I have 30 screenplays in me. 15, probably, but it's not that many. If you really think about it, 15 scripts is not a lot. So we have to be making sure, is this concept worth my time? Most writers jump to setup, meaning they have an idea in their head, but it's really just a presentation of setup, meaning your first act. You're just kind of thinking, okay, we have this interesting setup, but the then what happens after the setup is so much more important than the setup. Yes, the setup is essential because it's part of the pitch. But if you really consider what makes a great setup is the coming situation that will occur because of it. Not the moment of the setup, but what's going to happen based on this situation that you're creating with the setup. And I know that sounds kind of like the same thing, but it's not. It's very different because I've read so many log lines in my 16 plus years of working with writers and in the industry and et cetera. Most of them get to a level of, here's my first act, but I don't see the fresh take on that setup. I don't see this incredibly engaging situation moving through into the second act. And really for TV, it's even more important because your second act, and I'm putting that in quotes again, is your middle episodes of your season. Yes, your pilot episode and end episode has a second act, whether it's a sitcom or an hour long, but also the middle episodes of your season, whether it's 10 episodes, 22 episodes, whatever it might be. What that means then is for TV writers, your situation, and I'm going to be using that word a lot because I think it makes more sense in my brain, situation, the word, than just concept or your second act or adventure. Situation just inherently has conflict and obstacles and drama in it. Just the word does. So anyway, I'm using that word a lot because for TV writers especially, your situation is what's going to be propelling the audience through your series. They're going to be tuning in for the situation that this character is in, whether you're writing a literal situational comedy or if it's a Breaking Bad hour long or whatever it is in between, half-hour comedy on Hulu or HBO or something. It's the situation that we want to tune in and experience because it's fun or it's engaging or it's dramatic or deep. Like Call the Midwife. I don't know if anybody watches Call the Midwife. This is a really great example. I kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent, but not really. The basic concept for Call the Midwife is, well, for one thing, time period has something to do with it because I believe it's in the 60s when it takes place. But it's these women who are working as, oh boy, and I'm not going to get the terminology correctly, but as, what's the word? Of course, I have all these notes, and Call the Midwife is not one of the projects that popped into my head when I was making notes, but it did here because it's so straightforward. If you know the show, you know what I'm talking about. These nuns, for possibly lack of a better word, doulas is what I'm looking for. Thank you. They are assisting birth for people who can't afford medical care. But they're nuns, and they are, work within the world of religion, but they're kind and giving, and they go basically door to door in a lot of ways. That's the concept. But what you can see just inherently within that concept is the number of situations that come from that general idea of a concept, right? Every single episode, you're going to have some new baby that's going to be born. So not every idea is that simple, of course. Not every idea is Yesterday, the feature film about the guy that discovers the world forgot about the Beatles. Not every idea is that high concept and easy, but we should try to get there. There is, in every successful script, a relatively simple approach to a concept which leads to multiple or at least one really engaging situation. multiple situations meaning TV, one engaging situation meaning feature. And this is so essential for TV writers out there, and really for feature writers too. People are going to tune in to watch a TV show, the first episode, because they're like, oh, that concept's kind of cool. They're probably not saying the word concept. They're probably saying, that sounds fun, or that sounds neat, or I'd be into that. They're thinking concept. And the situation that may be coming up from inherent, life within it, within the concept. They're going to keep tuning in because of the characters who are delivering that concept. So I'm still really just on the concept level of this triangle. Is that right? So there's a lot. And I'll probably go maybe a little past 2 o'clock Wisconsin time. But my point is, and because I'm trying to kind of pull myself back because I don't want to go too far into this, otherwise it becomes a class just on concept, is that you really have to be asking yourself those questions of, is this idea that I have able to deliver a whole bunch of moments that are going to, define the tone of your show, whatever genre it is, and are those moments both repeatable? Like, am I going to see Jim Carrey unable to tell a lie for 24 hours over and over and over again? But also evolutionary, meaning there will be change. That moment will change a little bit as you go. It will evolve. How does it evolve? That then gets us down to that second level of the triangle, the character development. The characters are the ones who are delivering the situation, right? Because they're the ones living in it. So again, there's that word. When you're considering your concept, how interesting, fresh, and unique is my concept, but also, can it allow for brainstorm of list making? Didn't sound right. It didn't come out of my mouth correctly. Does it allow you to come up with 50 different moments and scenes, all having to do with whatever your setup might be? So like in Yesterday, again, it's a really high concept idea, but it's an easy one to just use as an example. A down and out musician who just wants to share his music wakes up one day and the world has forgotten who the Beatles are. That's a pitch, right? That's an interesting setup. So in a way, I'm contradicting myself, but you can see within that setup, he's a musician and he's the only one, I suppose I left this part out, he's the only one who remembers the Beatles. So now he is then what, right? I'm going to be referring to the then what. He starts writing from memory all these Beatles songs, and he becomes incredibly popular and famous and wealthy, blah, 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 because of it. Technically not wealthy, but if you've seen the movie. So it's the then what that really delivers that idea. From a list making standpoint, you can come up with so many different moments and scenes that may not even end up in the movie, all based on how many different ways can I show, A, the world not remembering the Beatles, B, this guy being the only one who does remember them, and then that's pretty much it, right? I mean, and then how he becomes famous and popular, etc. Those 3 little sections, you could have one Word document that you just put in 3, sections down 8 by 11 and just list, okay, here's A, here's B, here's C, and just come up with as many quick 1 or 2 sentence descriptions of moments and scenes. Here's a moment where his friends ask him to play a song that they haven't heard him perform before, or just play us a song because we're feeling kind of low. And he sings Yesterday. And they're like, that was the most beautiful song I've ever heard. And he's like, of course it is. It's a masterpiece, and the Beatles, and they don't know what it is. Fine, there's that. Come up with 10 more moments that could be similar to that, whether you use them in the script or not. Because after a while, it could just very well become repetitive and boring, and it's just the same thing over and over again. What then evolves those moments and the list making that you have is how the character is going to change because of the experience of this situation, but also, which is extremely important, and I see it far too often in projects that we're either considering for a production company or in my consulting, in general scripts that I read, is that the character doesn't have a strong enough of an objective or goal, which then results in a pursuit. What is that character trying to achieve? This is a little bit more for a feature-length movie, obviously. If you're writing a sitcom, it's a little more esoteric in general. If you have friends, the characters are just trying to survive being single people in New York. You know, it's a little, but it's still a pursuit. They're trying to do something. They're trying to grow up and you know, live their lives. It's still some level of pursuit. Pursuit in TV becomes a little bit more specific per the episode. What are they pursuing this episode within the larger situation? That's when you have all these other, you know, A story, B story, C story, sometimes D story coming into play. For TV writers, you have a lot more work to do. But that would be the first objective for you as a writer to work on in that character development level when you're brainstorming a new idea or when you're testing, you know, an existing script. Is my character trying to do something? What are they trying to achieve? And most stories ever, from a plot perspective, are broken down to 3, maybe 4 plot goals. It's escape, achieve, rescue or retrieve, recover and retrieve is about the same thing, but they're really basic things. Like, what is your character attempting to do? Is he escaping something? Is she trying to retrieve something? Is she trying to overcome something? And whatever that something is, we have to see that actively pursued, whether it's willing or unwilling. A character has to attempt to be doing something. Even in Breaking Bad, it stretches off over, you know, 5 seasons, but he's trying to care for his family. That's his pursuit. What can I do to take care of my family before I die? That's his primary A story pursuit. Every episode has different specific ones for the episode. To this episode, he has to do this, you know. That's his pursuit. That's what his goal is for the episode. Overall, it's living within the situation of him trying to take care of his family. The key factor in Breaking Bad is in the title. He breaks bad over the course of trying to take care of his family. He starts loving being the bad guy. And so he changes and evolves very slowly, but you can see it happen. In a feature, it has to happen in, you know, 110 pages or less. So that's the biggest thing to be asking yourself from that level of character development. Obviously, there are a whole bunch of other questions you have to be asking. You know, there's a lot more that you could be doing for character development. Flaw, personality traits, emotional issues, things that are holding that character back. What does the character desire, long for? Why can't the character have this thing that they want? That has nothing to do with plot, which I think is almost as important in terms of your pursuit. The goal, or the character has to have kind of 2 goals in a way, right? They have a plot goal and they have an emotional goal. So, and I'm even rolling my eyes at this now. So all of you regulars are probably thinking, oh God, here he goes again. I'm using National Treasure again as an example, mainly because it's on TV like once a day, 365 days a year. And if you haven't seen it, you never will. But most of the people know the basic concept. There's a map on the back of the Declaration of Independence that leads to treasure. Hi, Muggs. I like National Treasure. It's fun. There's nothing, you know, incredibly emotionally special about it. But I use this example because even in this idea, something that's just a popcorn movie, it's all about the fun and games and trying to find, there you go, Claudia. So it's one of your all-time favorites. So, you know, the basic goal is find the treasure, right? That's the plot goal, find the treasure. But the why behind it, why behind finding the treasure, is Nicolas Cage's emotional goal. He wants to prove his family name is correct, or, you know, he wants redemption for his family. He wants to prove everybody that he actually is worthwhile. You know, there are these other reasons. So we need to be knowing those things early on. And that's a lot of what the flashback stuff is in the first sequence, you know, the first 10 minutes of the movie or less, where we get to know his personal issues outside of this plot. We have not yet been presented, oh, we're going to go do this because I believe there's a map on the back of the, you know, Declaration of Independence. From a structural standpoint, we'll get there in a second. National Treasure it's laughingly formulaic. It's so obvious that you just accept it and you're like, all right, I'm in good hands. I'm not going to think that much, but that's why I like the movie so much. We'll get there. But there's a point at the end of the 3rd act that he just says, I'm going to steal Declaration of Independence. and we're like, okay, how are you going to do that? And so that then becomes a marriage of concept and character development, right? We've learned all those things up front in that first act within 25 pages, maybe 28, whatever the page count is. I'm not too worried about the logistical structure of things from a page count standpoint. We'll get to that. But we've learned all of those things about concept and character, right? We understand why Nicolas Cage is attempting to do this. Same thing goes for Yesterday. We have the same exact setup. The first 10 minutes, if you pause the movie at almost exactly the 10-minute mark from the point of, I think it was Universal, the logo coming on to the 10-minute mark, he is hit by a bus and is sent to the hospital. First major setup, event, moment, whatever, inciting incident, whatever term you want to use. And that's when everything changes. So it's the big moment. But before that, we knew what he was lacking. He was lacking recognition. We knew he loved music. He was actually pretty good. He has a best friend who probably is in love with him. He's oblivious. He lives in kind of a wacky world. His parents are extremely lovable, but they don't really understand all of this stuff is in the first 10 minutes. And it's all done. It's just one scene, one scene, one scene, one scene, maybe two in terms of the music part, because he's really trying hard to get his career going. And then right before he gets hit by a bus, he decides to quit. All of this is in 10 minutes. Richard Curtis is the writer. He wrote Love Actually and a whole bunch of other things, and he's a genius. So, it's difficult to compare ourselves to geniuses, but nonetheless, all of that is so quick and easy. But again, it's proving concept. It's proving character. We understand this so that by the time plot is introduced, the big plot being introduced, I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence. The Beatles don't exist. We've got that stuff out of the way. And we know this character, not incredibly well. There are other things we're going to discover about him. But we get it. It's like, okay, what's the situation? And then what is your second act? We're launching in, and now we're within this situation. So that's where then character and concept is married, but structure then going down to that third level, we tend to, as writers, and I've done this myself, so I'm using we on purpose, think up an idea and go, okay, cool, this is fun. And then you've gotten a character you spent maybe an hour or maybe less thinking about the character, jotting down some brainstorms. I think she's this way. I think she has this kind of issue. Okay, cool. And then you're like, how do I lay it out? I'm going to do a quick outline. And you come from a page standpoint, meaning by this page, this needs to happen. It's the save the cat approach. Nothing wrong with save the cat. There's nothing wrong with using that as a little bit of an anchor. Like, okay, if I'm 45 pages in and I haven't really hit that big setup event or the plot introduction, whatever the situation is, obviously I'm too long. So it's a nice little gauge. But page count, and I've said this on my story farm calls over the past couple weeks, and it's such a cliche and cheesy, but it's important to remember because sometimes cliches are true. But it's not about the page count, it's about making the pages count. And what I mean by that is in reference to structure. There's a logistical approach to structure, and then there's an emotional approach. And they're not that different. It's just logistical is more obvious. I need, if there are 12 sequences in a feature film, each sequence is roughly 8 pages. Some are 10, some are 5, whatever it might be. Then that means, okay, 3 sequences in the first act, 6 in the second act, 3 in the third act. You can break it down and organize it in that way, which helps the brain just kind of go, okay, cool. I'm going to just, and some consultants do a 10 sequence approach, some do 8, whatever. That's your logistical approach. I have this page count. I'm writing a horror movie. I should probably not go over 105 pages. All this is logistical stuff. It really doesn't mean that much when you're working on the development of an idea. That I want to come up with scenes and moments that are anchors, right? You can come up with those scenes. I know that we're going to have some big discovery for Nicolas Cage, at the 12-page mark or something. We're going to have our main character get hit by a bus, 11 pages in. And that's when the world, shuts down and suddenly wakes up and the Beatles aren't, no longer exist. Those anchor scenes you can hit. Midpoint complication, right? The middle of your script. You know you're going to have a big twist. Something changes everything. There's an emotional issue that occurs, and so now they go in a new direction. You know you're going to have a low point at the end of the second act where everything falls apart. There's no winning, right? And then, of course, the final sequence, the end, the climax, theme is stated, character corrects the flaws, you know, they overcome the opponent, all these terms we've heard, right? Those are fine anchor sequences to use for structure, but we should be spending so much more time on concept and character, because if we have not figured out what that situation is, if it's not unique enough, if we don't know what our general second act repeatable moment is, I call it the recurring moment, then your concept isn't working. And so that, then obviously I haven't talked about page work, but in a way I'm kind of ignoring it, because right now it's the triangles like this. In a way it could be flipped over so that we're spending that much more time on concept, that much more time on character, eventually getting to structure. And then it's like, well, page work right now, I'm developing a script, right? Because I'm not even writing it yet. I mean, I'm not going to worry about what my dialogue is going to be, what the scene heading is going to look like. If you're writing A Quiet Place, you know, a movie that can use the page work as a conceit, something unique and different, all right, that's fine, but you jot down some ideas. You know, you don't have to start writing right away. Most writers go, concept, character, I got it. Okay, I understand structure, whatever, let's start writing. Because it's fun and you want to get to those moments, you want to get to the dialogue and you want it to be, you know, engaging. That's really where you feel like you're creating something. But if you haven't spent the time on those 3 other levels, what are you creating? Like, it's not even worth it. And I'd hate to be harsh that way. But it's not ready, right? The first idea of a scene is rarely the best version. So why not work through what some of the scenes might be in just a brainstorm list? Just come up with stuff. You know, bring notepads around and go, oh, that could be a really funny little moment, and it could build into a funny scene. Sometimes you might have one line of dialogue, and I think I've mentioned this in class. I think we talked about page work last month. You might have one line of dialogue that kind of defines the DNA of your project. Like in my young adult fantasy novel about a fairy with shredded wings, the whole idea lives within this world of wish making and fairies and taking care of wishes, blah, blah, blah. And I knew I wanted my main character to say, who's going to grant my wishes? Like, that was a line I had in my head. I had no idea where it was going to exist. I had no idea who she was going to say it to. But I'm like, all right, that kind of defines not only who I think my character is going to be. She's going to be kind of pissed off and angry when she says it. She's a smart ass. But that was all. I didn't need anything more than that. I thought I saw a cat walking around. But this is now directly related. I'll just finish my thought there. Directly related to how readers and executives, people in the industry, even a friend who's reading a script, also tend to think about the script. And I'll get to that in a second. I just want to note, while we're at the halfway mark, if you have questions, which I am probably going to have plenty of time to answer questions, put it in the Q&A box down on the bottom of your screen, and I'll get to those questions. I know in past sessions, I kind of had to hurry through them because I ended up, you know, spending more time on the lecture. But I want to get to your questions. And it can be about anything, contests. It can be about the industry right now. How do I get a manager? You know, whatever. You can ask me anything. It doesn't have to just be about these things. Oh, and also, I'm going to put this in here. We are offering a discount on my online course, the craft course. And I think I emailed a lot of you about it. But you can use this code, craft course save 50. Let me just double check and make sure that's the right one. But you can get it for $49. It's usually $99. And it's a 12-week course. Yeah, craft course save 50. It's usually 99 bucks. You can get it for 49, 50% off. And you have it forever. It's a 12-week course. I go through all these levels there. I have audio and video on there. I'm eventually going to have an upgraded version where it's going to be almost all video, just me talking right to the camera. But and that'll be more expensive. But for now, for $49, thank you, Renee. You can use the course over and over again. There's no expiration. You could do it every week. You could do it, you know, for every single script that you work on. Thanks, Lyle. That's good. The whole point of education, whether you take my course or somebody else's or work with a different consultant, is there are some things about screenwriting you have to memorize, right? You have to just, it has to be normal and natural after a while. Once I started, and this was years ago, but once I really understood the basic logistical structure of how story works, and for TV too, TV is much more complicated, but it still follows that 12 sequence approach. Even though a feature is longer, an hour-long pilot still has those beats: main character, stage of life, a setup event. We have a secondary character introduced in some way who either influences or supports the main character. You have a midpoint complication. You have a low point. You have the climax of the episode. It follows the same structure, it's just condensed. A lot of what the craft course focuses on are those sequences. And the reason I spend so much, yes, Claudia, craft course save 50. You can use it as a coupon code. But the reason I focus so much on the sequences is because once you just memorize logistical structure, then you don't have to think about it anymore. I can start brainstorming per that sequence. Like, okay, my first sequence is supposed to have this happen. Generally speaking, what's my take on with this particular story that's going to occur in the first sequence? The one thing a lot of writers, and I've thought it myself, could consider as a problem is that, well, if everybody's doing it that way, how is it that any scripts are made? Because then it's just the same thing over and over again. And honestly, it's a really good question to ask. It's a difficult one to ask because you're right. But there are movies being made that are amazing and we love them, you know? And it's usually because the concept is so fresh and unique and interesting and fun and engaging, and it creates a situation that you want to really, you know, tune into. The structure is pretty much the same. Thanks, Claudia. Good. So going to the other side of this. So still looking at concept, character, structure, page work. For a reader, they are unconsciously, some of them consciously, considering those 4 levels, especially on the side of a studio executive or somebody who's running a production company, or, you know, taking material either from a manager or an agent or open submission from a writer, and considering it like, okay, is this a script of a TV show or a movie that our company would make? They look at it differently than a consultant or a contest reader or something would, because, and we'll just start with these executives first, that I just saw a comment come through. Shout out to the ISA for connecting me to the producer who'll be making my first film. That's amazing, Adam. Congrats. If you haven't posted a success story on your ISA profile, Adam, please do, because we'll happily share that. That's very cool. Yeah, so an executive at a studio, production company, et cetera, considering material. They may pass on your project because the concept just doesn't match what they're looking for. They're gonna look at concept first. They're not gonna dive in, well, how good is the writing? Because if their company doesn't make a Yesterday, why would they read it? Like, well, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for huge, you know, sci-fi action, even though there's some science fiction elements to Yesterday. But they'll pass because so all the other levels don't matter. That you could be, you know, Walt Whitman as a screenwriter, but it doesn't matter. So they'll pass because of concept. If they think concept's interesting, they're naturally then going to go, okay, I'll read it, but I'm not connecting to the character. That's the next thing they're thinking. You know, by this page, how many times do you hear that? I'll give it 20 pages. I'll give it 30 pages. That isn't a structural thing necessarily. It's because character and structure are, you know, inherently married. It's the character that delivers the concept, but it's also the character living within the structure that is delivering the concept. So nonetheless, they're going to give it 20 or 30 pages, not just because, well, I just want to read the first act. They're looking to see how engaged they are by this character delivering the concept they already know about because they read the log line or they heard a pitch. So like, okay, concept sounds cool. Let's see if I'm really engaged in this character. And then they're like, oh, you know, it's just, I wasn't gripped by this person, or it felt like I've seen this before because the character wasn't very fresh and unique, or I just didn't get a sense of you know, excitement, etc. If they think the character is okay and interesting, then they'll be like, well, okay, structure is there, you know, my first act, etc. might be running kind of long. Then they're going to focus on the page work. What's the writing look like? How engaged am I? What does it look like on the page? Are there giant chunks of action and scene direction, it's like reading a novel, or is it nice and crisp and clean? But also, how engaging are the visuals? Can I see this? Can I feel it? Literally, how do I feel when I'm reading this? If you can get an executive, like a studio reader, then just focusing on your page writing, great, because now you've made it through those other levels. Then it's kind of up in the air. Then it's like the executive thinking, all right, the writing's amazing. And sometimes you hear that from an executive. They're like, you know what, the writing on the page was fantastic, but I'm just not feeling the concept as much as I thought I would. It's not delivering on what, the level of excitement that I thought it was going to be, even though they read the log line, because you have to really think. It's how many different pitches and log lines does a producer or an agent or manager hear and read on a daily basis? They've heard it all. So the log line has to grip them, yes, but then that script obviously has to deliver on that promise that you've just given them. Then they'll start looking at page work and they'll start thinking about it all. A contest reader, a consultant, they're going to be thinking about it all, right? They're going to be considering it all because they have to. They're supposed to. They're paid to do that. They're not judging like, oh, do I like this concept? Is this something I would want to see? That's not fair. Because if somebody's judging for a contest, they have to think more along the lines of marketability or freshness. How unique is this? Is this something that I've seen before, I haven't seen before? If I have seen it before, then I'll look at some of the other levels. How's the character development working? But they're thinking about those things. So if they're thinking about it and you're not, you're already doing something wrong, and I don't mean to be so blunt or harsh there, but you have to understand this is what they're looking at and considering, whether it's conscious or not. You're doing it too when you're watching a TV show or a movie. Is this like Carnival Row on Amazon? Am I interested in like far too sexy and weird, dirty Fae characters? I watched it and it was very well done and cool, but it was kind of like, this is kind of difficult because it's making me uncomfortable, but it was a cool show. I tuned in because I like fantasy, right? Okay, concept. A little different in terms of the experience between a reader and a viewer, right? Because some people watch a Tom Cruise movie regardless of what he's in. So it's a little different, but nonetheless, you're still feeling that, right? Okay, do I like these characters? Why don't I like them? Am I okay with not liking them and still enjoying this? Not so much thinking about structure, but we are feeling structure. We're feeling pace, right? There's a pace to some movies that after a while, it's like, holy cow, this is so slow. Or we move through that first, 10 minutes so quickly, I have no idea what's going on. It's all up there. You just have to be aware of it. And if you can develop and brainstorm from that level, spending the time on concept, you're just going to be that much further ahead in that project and you're testing that material. I could go on a lot more with that, but I'm going to hit all these questions, promise. All right, Joe Beatty. First question, what city is your house in? I am in Delavan, Wisconsin. I'm near Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, so I'm in the southeast part of the state. Joe, again, I'm very interested in webinars that deal specifically with page work. So Joe, I believe it was last month, but you can go on our pro tips and tricks page, networkisa.org. If you're not a member, you should sign up. Regular membership's free. These webinars are free for all members right now. We're going to go back to Connect only pretty soon. It's worth the $10 a month, not just for these classes. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but all the other things that you can get on the website, $10 a month. But anyway, I did one of these classes on page work. It was either last month or the month before, but it should be on the pro tips and tricks page. Page work meaning I talk about format, transitions, scene heading, scene direction, dialogue, a whole bunch of things. The continuous in a scene heading. I don't know how many times I see it used incorrectly. Anyway, that's what page work is. What are the main areas? This is asked by Mary. Main areas that readers grade scripts during screenplay contests. It's pretty much what I covered, Mary. Concept, character, structure, and page work. A lot of times they'll divvy those up. Those will kind of be like the primary categories, and then they'll have subcategories. It'll be like pace or emotional arc, dramatic action. It's every contest different. but there'll be a whole different list of categories: marketability, uniqueness, plot, which is basically concept, but plot's a little more specific because we want to see, okay, what's that basic level of plot pursuit? Have we seen this situation before? There are a lot of others. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Ryan, best way to get representation that fits your writing style and goals. I said that quickly, I'll slow down. Best way to get representation that fits your writing style and goals. Well, I think the first part of that question is really more important. Best way to get representation, because representation should be supporting your writing style and goals. You know, that if the latter half of that question is a little bit more geared more toward writers who are already represented. Is my agent or manager supporting my goals and me, you know, as my voice? Are they doing enough for me? Do they understand who I am? Those are all good questions that every writer should ask once they're represented. Best way to get representation, for one, I'm being a smart aleck, but write an amazing script. You know, everybody says that, but it really is true. If you write something that is amazing on all levels, all these levels we've talked about, you put in the time, it's going to get recognition from somebody that can do something with it, usually through contests or the fellowships. Every studio has a free fellowship that you can apply for. Coverage services, consultants, you know, somebody's going to be like, this is amazing, because everybody in town hates to read because most of the time when they read, what they read is bad. We love reading a script that's incredible. You know, I don't know how many times I can count it on my maybe two hands, where just the script came across the desk and you're like, holy shit, I wish I would have written that. Or who is this person? This is incredibly well written. Or this concept is so easy and fun. It doesn't happen often. And so a reader wants to read something that's really amazing. So first and foremost, focus on your craft, becoming as good of a writer as you can be, for lack of a better way of saying that. And then get your material out there and test it, meaning submit to contests. Contests are real. People do, well, executives not only pay attention to the big ones, they usually only pay attention to the big ones. Page, Nickel, Austin, maybe, you know, ISA Fast Track, maybe a Screencraft contest, tracking board. They're the ones you've heard of. But the mid-level, you know, the middle tier screenplay contest, the lower level tier, if you can gather a whole bunch of wins, sometimes I'll get an email, or we will, I should say, you know, we have a development company with the ISA, and we'll, you know, find a writer that has won like, you know, 15 different contests. We're going to be like, yeah, send us your material. So obviously you're doing something right, and other people are saying yes first. Everybody wants somebody else to say yes first. So contests are a great way to do that. But and to go back to your question, Ryan, the best way to get representation that fits your writing style and goals, you should be interviewing the manager or agent in a way, you know, as opposed to, oh my God, somebody wants to represent me. Yes, I'll take it. If you're doing well enough that people want to represent you, then there will probably be a couple other managers or agents that want to also. From an agent level, it's different. You know, a manager is managing your career, all of your projects. You as a writer, they're going to help develop you. They may end up producing, you know, one or two of your projects. An agent is really only going to come into play when there's business on the table. And we hear that all the time. I'm putting quotes in the air. When somebody is offering money for something, or the agent is representing either a company or a writer because that agent knows she can make money off of him. I hate to drill it down like that, but it's true. An agent is in the game to make money. I mean, that's basic. Of course, a manager is too, but a manager is much more involved. with you and your writing career. And some agents are very involved. So I shouldn't say that, you know, we have an agent for our development company, and she's amazing. She does a lot of development work for us. But not every agent does that. Most of the time they're going to come on just because, okay, hey, I have an offer. Well, great, let me see if I can get a better one. Do you review this is from Leslie, do you review a script for the student in the course? So the online course, the craft course, I don't. You can purchase a one-time evaluation through the ISA website. You can get a development evaluation, which I think is $199, 5 pages of notes. I'm not reviewing it, although I have started reading some of the development evaluation submissions. Or you can purchase a craft and career evaluation through the website. And I'll go through very thorough notes. You and I will talk on the phone. I'll record it. I'll send those written notes, and it'll be however long we need. It could be 45 minutes. It could be an hour and a half. It could be 20 minutes. And if the script's so great, I'll be like, hey, you did it. I have a bug flying. But so if you purchase the craft course, no, a built-in evaluation is not in there. For $49, that would be one heck of a deal. But there are other ways to get evaluations. You could go to thestoryfarm.org, my website, and I have call packages. I have very little room on my roster right now. I just sent an email out a couple days ago, maybe even yesterday, saying, hey, I'm closing out my roster by the end of September. If anybody wants to jump in, let's do it. But I still have, you know, very few roster slots. And I've already had 2 people, 3 actually, say, cool, let's do it. So that limits my time that much more. So if you want to work with me, email me and we'll figure it out. But anyway, that's Leslie's question. Shaden or Shaden, what would be the next step after a production company is interested in one of my scripts? A lot depends. It's very relative, but you will need to get an entertainment lawyer, somebody to represent you, mainly so that you are not negotiating money for yourself. Now that sounds ironic, but you want to be working with a production company from a creative level. You want that relationship to be established wholly in the sense of creativity, right? You're going to be working together, hopefully. They're going to be working with you to develop the project. If not, and they're just going to buy the script and just push you out, I mean, for one, that would suck, and hopefully that doesn't happen. Some people may want to do that, but you know, you want to try to get the credit, right? You want to have, that's in a lot of ways, the credit is more important than the money because you're building a career, right? You want to have that credit. So first thing would be, I need somebody to represent me. I need an entertainment lawyer. Or you find an agent. You're probably not going to find, you know, if you've never sold anything before, going to ICM or CAA or one of these major agencies, they're not going to, you know, and that you shouldn't even take offense to that, but they represent the biggest people, and we're not the biggest people yet. So you should try to find somebody to represent you and let them negotiate what your deal is going to be. You know, you should be aware of the Writers Guild minimums. There's a chance that you are not in the Writers Guild, so you probably won't get the minimum, but you can gauge it a little bit. Like, okay, if the minimum is 72 grand for this type of project, I'll take 20 or whatever, you know. You can use that as a little bit of a negotiation process, but you should be aware, and you can find them online. You can just Google WJ minimums, and it tells you what they are. But, and from there, it's all dependent on, does the production company want to work with you? You'll go through a development phase, sometimes an extremely long one, sometimes so long that the executive quits who took on your project, and then they're not going to make the movie anymore. Sometimes it's so long that they just believe in the project so much that they're trying to get the script right. But then the other part of development is that they're trying to cast the right people. They're trying to find, you know, an actual on-set producer or somebody big, you know, with a big name who's going to come on and help get the thing financed, because it may not be financed unless the company itself is financed through a different entity. There are a whole bunch of different elements there that come into play. I mean, to simply answer your question, next step after a production company is interested in one of your scripts is to send them the script and be excited. You know, you should be proud that they are asking for that. Don't then send them anything more than what they ask. You know, if somebody asks you to read the script because they're interested, don't go, cool, here's also a lookbook and a Bible and a video I made, and they'll be like, holy moly. You know, just send them what they ask. Nice shot, Ted. my first time, so forgive this one. I see Marilyn, Audrey, and it looks like Joan all behind you. Who's the small figure frame left behind you? Okay, so this, oops, this is, oh my God, that's so weird. I can't do this. This is Audrey Hepburn reading a script. Up here is Marilyn Monroe walking through the Hollywood Hills, also reading a script. This is Grace Kelly. She's on set of a movie, I can't remember, so she's in costume, but she's reading a script. And then down here is Marilyn Monroe reading, I think the newspaper at the time was Motion Picture Daily News. Yeah, Motion Picture Daily News. And then I also have Cary Grant with the dog reading a script. I found all these great photographs on Etsy, and I moved into this place. I've kind of kept a lot of artists on Etsy in business because I've purchased so many. But I saw all these different photographs of people like reading books and scripts. I'm like, come on, it's what I do all day long, so that's cool. Thank you for asking. What about the plot itself, if they like the concept and the characters? So plot and concept are somewhat of the same thing. So when I say concept, I'm also kind of meaning plot, but it is different, so I guess I should differentiate. Plot is the basic approach to the goal, right? How interesting, have we ever seen a movie where an archaeologist said, I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence because there's a map on the back of it? You know, I mean, no, we haven't heard that idea before. So the plot is the ongoing situation, but with a goal. Plot needs goal. Concept is like overall situation. Jim Carrey is unable to tell a lie for 24 hours. But to further the concept, you then allow plot to come into play. And it's because Jim Carrey's kid made a wish that, you know, his dad wouldn't lie. And so for 24 hours, during the biggest case of his career, he has to tell the truth. All of that makes up the plot. The character and emotional stuff is him needing to reconnect with his son, to not be such a workaholic, to learn that truth is, you know, better than lying, how to, you know, accept who you are, you know, all those emotional things. That comes in hand with the obstacle and obstacles that the character faces within the plot. So what if they like the concept and the characters? It's tricky, you know. So if they like the concept and then they don't like the plot, that means it's probably either it's not as simple in terms of the goal and pursuit, or it's a little too convoluted where there are, you know, all these different storylines going on and it's hard to follow, even though the characters might be well written. I make that note a lot when I'm working with my story farm writers, where I tell most of my writers, I tell them, when taken out of context, this scene is great. Like there's nothing wrong with your writing ability. And it's a weird note to give because most of us have talent, right? We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't feel like we weren't talented. But when put into context and you have a scene that just doesn't, it's like a odd transition from the previous scene, or it doesn't really lead us somewhere toward the next scene. And then you look at 3 or 4 or 5 scenes in a row and you're like, boy, I'm not really following exactly what this writer's trying to do, because I was connected to this one plot line, meaning save, you know, the treasure or whatever. And then we're going off on a tangent with all these other things, or we have all these flashbacks. I see that a lot, like some flashback scenes, again, when taken out of context, I'm like, yeah, it's a cool scene, but why am I flashing back? I could just stay in the present, you know. So it's tricky, and most readers are not consciously thinking, well, it's just the plot that I don't like. They're just like, I just didn't connect with it. Some readers just don't give you reasons why. Contests and consultants obviously should be. Let's see, we have a lot more questions coming in, so I'm gonna have to kind of cap this to about 10 after the hour. So what about the plot itself? We got that one. D, would like to ask simple question via email, if okay, if these questions are open to everyone. You can email me, anybody can email me. So max@thestoryfarm.org. Email me whatever you want. I may not be able to give like thorough development, creatively, you know, oriented notes or something. I can do my best to answer questions. But if I open myself up to any and all questions always, it would be my only job. So, you know, be cognizant of my time, but of course, I'm happy to answer as many questions as you have. Latest script that my manager is shopping around town right now, period piece biopic. The story nobody knows about the person everybody knows. In such a situation, is it best to try and get an actor attached, since it's such a drama showcase for the lead, or to seek producers, with access to funding? It's a big question, and it's a good question. It depends. So, and I know I always say that, but it does. It depends, because if you can find, going the route of getting talent attached, especially if you want A-list talent, you get the agencies involved, and they're going to take over. Right? You know, they're just going to instill themselves completely into the project. This is one of the reasons the WGA has been fighting the major agencies for so long, is that once they get a hold of the project, it becomes kind of theirs, even though you have a writer connected to it. That writer may not be represented by that agency, which means that we would probably just put one of their own writers on it, because suddenly they start packaging that project. They have 2 or 3 of their own actors. They get one of their own writers. They try to find a producer that they're in, cahoots with, and now you're left out. Like, you have nothing to do or say with it. So it's tricky. Like, not every single agency does that. Not every single actor does that. Kind of depends. But if you want one of the huge names, you're probably going to come up against that. They're represented by CAA, ICM, WME. Like, those are the 3 primary agencies that represent pretty much all of the talent in town. That's a gross exaggeration, but nonetheless. If you can go to a production company, get them involved, try to allow some form of financing to come into play. A lot of PODs, PODs, producers with overall deals is what that stands for. The companies like Sugar 23 or Screen Arcade. I was gonna say A24, but I can't remember who their overall deal would be with. They might be self-financing, but nonetheless, producers with overall deals, PODs, they have deals with the Netflix, the Amazon, MGM, all the studios. So if they take on a project, and they say yes to it, they then have to pitch it to the studio. If you have an actor already attached to that project, they may not want that actor. So the pod would be like, oh, we can't work with that person because of this, or you never know. I'm making things up because, again, it's so relative. So I think my answer would be, try to find a producer or a company that would be interested in taking it on. It'll allow your manager to potentially be connected to it as a producer also. Because, again, if you try to get major talent attached, they might just kick you off. And then if you do get talent attached and the person is really talented but doesn't have a name, does that really help you sell the project? Anyway, I could go on and on with that. I'll try to get through these. Daniel, of course, boy, I think this happened last time. I have a wasp flying through my living room. I don't know where they get in. At least I'm far away from it. Daniel, any advice for maximizing the benefits and or minimizing the downfalls of a Zoom-based table read? Oof. Good question. I managed to book a great cast. I want to do everything I can to make the whole event as enjoyable and beneficial as possible. I would make sure everybody is as prepared as possible. Go through some read-throughs before the table read, because what you're trying to do is record it for yourself, or at the very least have the actors make sure that it's not a cold read. They've gone through this before. If you have to, pay them or give them a gift. It's a lot of work for the actors to do. It's a lot of work for the person who's reading the narration and the scene direction. So just take it seriously from a level of practice, because you're going to have some form of a technical, glitch. It's just going to happen. Like, expect it to happen. So if it does, oh, well, there's not that much you can do. Maybe have a separate recording device. Maybe ask the actors to have their own little recording devices, or if they have QuickTime on their laptop, record it separately. It's creating more work for you. But yeah, just prepare and plan, I think, would be my best way of saying that. How do you make sure that your pilot's thrilling and engaging enough to deliver to an executive while having lots of things left to deliver throughout the season? It's all about the situation. It's all about the presentation of coming moments. So if you've come up with this really cool idea, I'm trying to think of a show idea. something that I've seen recently. So okay, this is an interesting, animation's really huge right now. Because of the whole COVID and pandemic situation from a production standpoint. Production is stalled quite a bit. They're slowly getting back into it. Things are going to pick up again, probably January, February, but hopefully January, February, March. Anyway, I'm totally, oh yeah. So you have to look at the coming situation. And so I started watching this show called The Dragon Prince on Netflix. I'm trying to pitch my own book as an animated series. So I'm just trying to watch as many shows as possible. And what they do with, and this is ages probably 6 to maybe 14 age range. It's geeky, it's fantasy, blah, 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 but it's fun. They set up the coming problem. Like, here's the conflict as early as possible, even in a 24-minute episode of animated TV for kids. It's sometimes a perfect example to watch animated shows and go, here's the situation, here's the overall series, and The Dragon Prince is very serialized. Like, they'll cut you off with a cliffhanger, so-called, at the end, and you're like, whoa, okay, I guess you answered nothing. I have to keep watching. So it's all about the coming conflict. What am I presenting in this pilot, whether it's a half-hour sitcom or if it's an hour-long serialized, Handmaid's Tale. Look at Handmaid's Tale. I mean, come on, that situation is so crazy. How can you not want to tune in and go, what is going to happen next? So that's how we want to be presenting our pilots to an executive. And that's all about concept. It's all about plot. And it's all in the brainstorming of it. Sometimes shows just don't have it. And I'm not saying yours doesn't, Chris. But sometimes you just can't squeeze enough out of it. And you see those shows sometimes actually get made, right? But there was something in the concept that we were like, oh, that's kind of cool. It just doesn't have legs to go 5 seasons. But it's all about the coming conflict, this coming situation. Is this situation always going to be interesting? Like, look at Sleepy Hollow on Fox. I watched the first 2 seasons, and they were great. Season 3, I think, and I don't even think I watched 4 if there was one. It just became like, well, how much can you really run away from the Headless Horseman and devils and Satan? After a while, it's just boring and repetitive. But the first 2 seasons were amazing because the situation. You have Ichabod Crane from the 1700s in present day fighting demons. I'm like, yeah, I'll watch that. And then I kept watching because the characters were engaging. So it's all about the coming situation and problem. How do you know if your characters are right for your concept? Oh boy, really good question. And this kind of goes back and forth, because if you come up with a character first, you then have to come up with the concept and the plot for the character to live in. If you come up with a situation, which is concept and or plot, then putting the right type of character in there is necessary so that both can grow, right? Like, here's an example. This really risk-averse, romantically hopeless guy, he's terrified of everything, never takes a risk, gambles in any way, is forced on an extreme sports expedition. Now we have a little, like, which came first? Is it the extreme sports expedition? Probably, because it's high concept. It's like a tour through Europe. I'm thinking of a project that never went anywhere, so I'm not ruining anything, but it should have gone somewhere. But nonetheless, it's like a tour. It's a tour through Britain and Europe, but everybody that is on it is like an extreme sports adventure tour, right? The twist is that the tour guide truly believes she's going to find Excalibur at the end of the tour. Like, she's actually a guise to help find this thing. Then you put this character into that situation, right? So if you have this wild situation, what would be the most fun character to allow for the most fun in that concept? Obviously, you'd be going for action comedy. If you're going for thriller or horror, it's going to be a different type of character. You're not going to have some goofy, risk-averse idiot. If you want, a real serious, dramatic thriller, you're going to have somebody who's probably amazing, like an Indiana Jones or something, even though there's some comedy in there. So it's about marrying the two. What can the character do for the concept, and what can the concept allow for the character to experience? I think would be the best way to answer that. Interested in development and evaluation. You might have done this, but would appreciate a final summary. I'll do that, Albert. Let me get through a couple of these. I had a script viewed on ISA. Interest under consideration. What does this mean for my script and its potential? It means that we go through, we or other industry professionals, we go through the writing gig and we're just looking at log lines first. So if the person going through the log lines, and they might read the synopsis, okay, cool, the log line's kind of neat, we'll read the synopsis. If it's under consideration, it means they're still comparing it to a lot of the other projects that are in the list that they've whittled down from 500 to 18 or something. And so it means kind of what it means. It's hard to say that, what does it mean? Is it going to advance? Maybe. It just depends on what that industry pro is looking for and how well your project is matching up with with the rest of the competition. Really, I hate to put it that way. We're all in this together. I don't want to make people compete against each other. But do you have to win a contest or at least be a finalist to be considered ready to send your work out? So really good question, Lyle. I hate to be blunt. Sometimes we have to be. If you're a quarter finalist in any screenplay contest, whoa, that is a big bug. What is that thing? If you're a quarter finalist in any contest, congratulations, but it's not as big of a deal as some people make it out to be. Please don't hate me for saying that. The reason I say that is because if you've been working on your craft, if you've been studying, if you've been working at this for 10 years, you should make quarter finalist. If you don't make quarter finalist, and I'm literally saying any contest, nickel, even, nickel, then there's something wrong with the script. Maybe not you, but the script isn't working. So you can't take it personally. And the reason I say even nickel, they get 12,000 entries or something. It's still, of course, a good thing. You should still be happy. It's not going to necessarily advance your career. If you have one script in your arsenal, you reach out to a major agent at CAA and say, hey, I made quarterfinalist, nickel. They're going to be, honestly, I'm telling you the truth, big deal. They're going to say that. So if you make semifinalist, especially in a big contest, that's something to consider. Finalist and win, absolutely. So that is something that's what you're aiming for. Finalist or contest champion. That then you can reach out to people and say, look, I have this project and it's won, this contest, preferably a relatively major contest. If it's won 30 small contests, okay, it's 30 different contests. If you win nickel, people are going to reach out to you. You don't have to send anything out. Same kind of goes for Page, Fast Track, the big ones. Some of the middle tier ones, ISA does a lot for their contest winners. Like Table Read My Screenplay is kind of a mid-level contest, meaning they get less than 2,000 entries most of the time. I think they've had a couple seasons where it's more than that. Great, you win that. It's an amazing experience, but the ISA is going to be working for you. Most contests are going to do that. Let's get through a few more here. How many months do you recommend spending on one script? So it totally depends. I know some writers who are just talented enough to spend one weekend on a first draft and go, you know what, this is actually pretty good. I'm going to spend the next weekend or next week or weekend rewriting it. And they're good, but they've also been spending so much time developing their own craft, reading so many scripts, consuming material, reading other people's projects, giving notes. They've done that educational level. 9 months, probably longer than you need. I would say if you're going through the process of outlining and really taking your time to go through the upper levels of that triangle, concept, character, structure, 4 months. 5 months, if you're putting in the time. Obviously, if you don't have the time, if you have 1 hour a day, it's going to take you longer. So it kind of depends. Let's see. Anna is asking, are you doing evaluations for writers based in Europe? I've worked with plenty of writers in Europe. Yeah. Obviously, the time change is a little different, but we just do our calls over Skype. Yeah. Options. How long? Can you expand on this a little bit? So I'll do my best just because I'm running a little low, or a little low on time, I guess. Options. If it's longer than 18 months, say no. Even 18 months is pretty long. 12 months is very, very normal. You should accept 12 months. Less than that, you know, okay, you take what you can get. You want 8 to 12 months. 6 months is just like, what can you really get done in 6 months? Everything takes so long. It could sometimes take 4 months for somebody to read a script. So you need that time. 18 months is if you are a new writer and it's a legitimate company and the option feels and sounds good, you know, you had somebody else review it, not a bad, 18 months is fine. But there's usually some level of 12 months with the option to extend, and you know, the production company can offer that up. So suddenly they'll extend another year after that. That's pretty normal. Other than contests, what else can we do to get noticed, especially if we want to get staff in a writer's room? Yeah. I'm an attorney in my early 30s, so this would be a second career. You know, try to write some specs of shows, meaning scripts of existing shows. A lot of managers want to see that, but it's also great practice. You know, I love the show Dairy Girls. I'm going to try to write an episode of that. See if I can write that type of show, because that's usually what a showrunner or somebody who's doing the hiring on a show is going to look like. Can this writer write my show? A lot of people are reading pilots now instead of specs because they want to see, can you make your own show? What's your voice? I think the best, easy, and quick answer, Rebecca, would be to develop your voice, understand who you are from a writer's perspective. What am I trying to say? What am I trying to do? Am I a comedic writer? Am I a dramatic writer? And write to those genres. If you want to be writing on a Breaking Bad kind of show, write those shows so that you can prove that you can do it. In terms of getting noticed, the TV writing fellowships in the studios are probably the best way for unrepresented writers who, you know, don't have a whole bunch of ins in the industry, can get staffed. Almost every studio has one. They're free to enter. They're extremely cutthroat, very competitive. They get a ton of entries. A lot of people enter 3, 4, 5 years in a row and still don't win. Very difficult, but very possible. So don't take that, you know, so negatively. ISA writing gigs on the ISA website. You can submit to writing gigs. Contests, like you said, other than contests. Trying to get referrals from people. If you know anybody in the industry at all, talk to them. You know, if I write a great script, would you consider referring me? Try to attend as many events as you can. Right now, it's difficult to do that. But join, you know, maybe writing groups or Facebook writers groups. You never know who you're going to meet. Where does theme fit in? Okay, so I'm going to kind of cut the questions off at this point. Sorry, everybody. Where does theme fit in? So theme is what you want the audience to feel by the end of your, we'll say, movie. TV shows, not all of them have theme. They have a message, maybe. There's like a feeling and tone. Theme and message, I guess, are the same things, but, you know, theme is a little bit more obvious in the feature world because it's like, here's the lesson, but the lesson is presented through the character's experiences, how the character reacts to those experiences, and then how the character corrects those problems, the personal problems that the character has. Nicolas Cage, in basic theme could be never stop believing in your own truth, you know, and that it is proven because he discovers the treasure at the end, you know. So theme is stated or shown, sometimes literally in Disney movies, stated at the end of the movie. Character says, you know, I think you should let go. And he lets go. Or in a lot of ways, in most movies, the character does something by overcoming the opponent. The opponent represents the problems in that character's life. And by that character overcoming that opponent, then we show theme. Because of also what the character has gone through. And then by that third act, the character has to do something different. That something different is also then connected to what we've seen them do. I don't know if that helped. It's a big question, D. I don't know what your first name is, sorry. But I hope that helped a little bit. Can you repost the discount code here in Q&A or in the chat room? Sure, it's Craft Course Save 50. Craft Course Save 50. www.thecraftcourse.com. screenwriters.com. Can you say more about how COVID has affected script sales and development industry in Hollywood? So it has affected script sales in a way that people are just afraid to spend money. It still is happening, but it's usually for the projects that are a little bit more of a sure bet. They already have amazing talent on board. The agencies, have the project, they're packaging it. There's trust built behind it beyond just the project itself. You see a lot of source material being purchased, based on a book. There's a built-in audience. In terms of the development side of things, the irony is that there's been a ton of development going on because there's more time for it. There just hasn't been that level of commitment yet. And so it's an interesting thing because a lot of companies and studios are going back to their vaults, so to speak, and finding scripts they passed on, but they own it, so they don't have to buy that script, and then they'll look at it and start developing it. People are just afraid, I should say, the industry is a little afraid to spend money because they're not exactly sure when theaters are going to open up again. But also from a level of TV, how do you go into production on a regular show? Not only on set, but the writer's room. Writer's rooms can usually be done through virtual Zoom meetings, but it's such a different experience when you're in a room with all these creative people and developing and brainstorming and going back and forth. You've probably all, obviously right now you're all on Zoom. If you're in a room with a bunch of people, one person can talk and then everybody else has to, if you try to jet in, it blocks the other person's voice. It's very difficult. So they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And not all is dire because there is a lot more reading and considering happening because they are waiting for things to start to launch. And they are starting. They do have a lot of rules in place that they're starting to follow. Films are starting to get shot again. TV shows are being planned in terms of being shot again. So it's just about being as patient as you can. And it's why using this time, you as a writer, to just try to develop as much material as you can so that by the time things do start rocketing up again, you'll have material to send them. Do you think producers really are seeking fresh and underrepresented voices? Absolutely, without a doubt, 100% confident. Yes, they absolutely are. The key is you still have to be good. I don't mean to be a jerk there. Your material still has to be working. They're not just going to be like, Joe Blow off the street. You're underrepresented. Let's do it. They, of course, but it's also from a level of, we want that voice because audiences want to see that voice. They want that different, unique, fresh voice. Those voices have not been heard enough. That then can create unique and fresh material so that it is then delivered to the audience in a way that they haven't seen before. So it's all connected. The script still needs to be great. You really still need to do your job. Yes, it is about giving the spotlight to underrepresented voices because they deserve it, but it's also because we haven't heard their stories be told before, right? It's always people who look like me and my age, which, it's a downer for me, but oh well. There's a balancing out that's coming into play here, and it's just something you have to figure out. For everybody listening, whether you are an underrepresented writer, if you write a great script, you have to believe it's going to make its way into somebody's hand and they're going to do something with it. So please believe that, All right, last one. Joe is asking, what genres do you specialize in my screenwriting consulting? So what kind of scripts or movies or stories do you like best? So I don't specialize in one particular genre, regardless of what you're working on. If it's TV or film, I don't really have the time to help develop a novel. I've tried, but it's just a lot more work. TV or film, honestly, I don't specialize in anything. You can bring who you are, and I'm going to do everything I can to match your voice and give, half education, half development. In terms of what I love comedy. I like fantasy, but fantasy is extremely difficult to develop, not only for just basic story reasons, because it's so expensive, and if you don't have source material, it's going to be difficult to get the thing made. Action comedy, but it's hard to say. I think I've read so many amazing horror screenplays. I'm not a huge horror fan. I like scary movies. I don't like slasher horror kind of stuff. But some of the best scripts I've read have been horror. So it's, you come to me and we'll work together. But all right, everybody. So I think that hits everything. I was going to do a little recap for a gentleman who asked, and I apologize, I can't remember your name. Concept at the top of the triangle, character development, structure, page work. So the reason it's like that is because us writers tend to focus that amount of time on those levels. We should be flipping it, or at least making them equal out a little bit. Spend just as much time on concept as you do character, just as much time on concept as you do structure, and maybe even a little less on structure. How much time are we spending on page work? Do we need to go right to pages if we haven't really developed the concept yet? Readers, either executives at studios or production companies, managers, agents, are going to be consciously or unconsciously thinking along the same levels or tiers. And then contest readers are going to be doing the same thing. It's not a consideration type of situation, meaning they're not going, well, I don't like this concept. It's more about, is it marketable? Is it fresh, unique? Have I seen that type of concept before? Concept and plot, yes, they're kind of the same thing. Plot's a little bit more active, meaning here's the goal, here's the situation that the character is living within with a pursuit toward something, achieve something. I'm going to have 2 more of these before the end of the year. One at the end of October, and then one I think kind of like second week in November. I'm going to do it before Thanksgiving because I think we all deserve to take a break over the holidays because this has been one hell of a year. And let's just try to make this last 2 seasons, I suppose, fall and winter, a lot better than the first 2 seasons in whatever way we need to. I'm not trying to, raise any alarms, but it's been a difficult year. I hope everybody's been dealing with it as best they can. We have only a few short months left. Why not make the most of this year, as much as we can? So keep working hard. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Hopefully we see you next month. And don't forget that this is recorded, so you can go to the ISA's website at the Pro Tips and Tricks page, or on YouTube. You should be subscribing to the YouTube channel, International Screenwriters Association. All right, everybody. Thank you, and I'll see you next month.